Hello, I'm Sthíven Roy Gudmani, host of Higher Education Today. Welcome back to the education program that connects you to contemporary issues, people, and institutions involved in the world of higher education. Today's special show in Yerevan, Armenia is thanks to Ararat TV, UDC TV, Georgetown University, and the American University of Armenia. Karine Harությունyan is Deputy Minister of Education and Science for the Republic of Armenia. Father Messrop Aramian is Educational Advisor to the President of Armenia and a priest of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Sուրեն Ալոյանը is Founder, Chairman, and CEO of Dasaran Educational Program, which is based here in Yerevan. Welcome to all of you.
Hi.
Well, maybe if we could start with you, Father Messrop. Can you say a word or two about the connection between education and spirituality here in Armenia?
When we speak about education, we understand that it is a connection of values and knowledge. And historically, spirituality and education are strongly connected in the Armenians' history. Starting from 5th century, when Armenians invented their alphabet and established the Armenian school, spiritual values, ethnic values, and education are strongly connected. And we can state somehow that to understand Armenians, to understand their phenomenon, how they could survive during centuries, we have to see the connection of values and education.
And fair enough. And Karine, in terms of the values that Father Messrop was referring to, do you try to instill some of those values in the day-to-day work at the ministry?
I will not say at the ministry, but rather in the education system. Yes, all our programs, all our standards for education does have a specific place for the values. And our children, our educators also place a great attention to the values.
And does the ministry not place attention to the values, or is it?
It does. So it does, because the programs for general education specifically are always approved by the Ministry of Education.
And does that include something like Dasaran? Did you have to approve, and I'm assuming Suren's going to want to speak for himself, but did you have to approve the work that he's doing?
Not really, but we support the work of Dasaran because it's more a private initiative that has been started by a group of young and talented people. But at this point, the ministry supports it, and we also ask all the schools to use the platform and the website that is created by this group.
Fair enough. And Sուրեն, if you could say a word or two about that group, and if you incorporate any of the values that Father Messrop was talking about as well.
Well, yeah, thank you, Steve. First of all, absolutely, Dasaran is in cooperation with the state. This is probably one of the best outcomes between state and private cooperation. Dasaran itself, in translation, means classroom. In reality, a big classroom. Dasaran is a knowledge community which connects hundreds of thousands, actually, people around one idea, which is education. We are trying to embrace innovative education, which opens up new horizons for the Armenian school children. Actually, we started it about 7 years ago with, as Deputy mentioned, with young and talented people. The idea behind this work was that the educational program develop various electronic tools which make getting education and knowledge more entertaining and efficient. You know, everything behind this is that to have a good and prosper Armenia in the future, we need to have educated and knowledgeable generation. This is one of the most idea behind this work.
And What has struck me since I've been in the country, and maybe I would ask all of you this, is there's been an incredible emphasis on education. And whether or not this comes from a historical aspect, a religious aspect, a cultural aspect, it seems something that's been striking to me. Am I misreading that, or is this just really a part of the DNA of Armenia?
Yeah, it's part of, we can say, DNA of Armenia. And Armenians somehow worship, the education, the alphabet, their cultural and educational heritage, and they will do their best to give their kids the best educational opportunities. And as I said, the Armenian phenomenon is strongly connected with educational schooling traditions, starting from 5th century. And I can say it's a special movement towards perfection. And that's why Armenians could survive. You have to be unique to survive in this region. You have to manage to connect, your culture, your inner powers, your values, be the best to survive. And we also survived genocide, and we could do this because we had this, power, spiritual power, and power towards perfection in our DNA.
And how do the universities communicate that now? Maybe, Karine, that's a question for you. How do the universities in Armenia execute those ideas that Father Mesrop just mentioned?
As Father Mesrop said, education was traditionally a part of Armenian history, and education, the schools in Armenia, helped to maintain Armenian identity through the centuries when Armenia does not have independent statehood. So as a part of Armenian history, both the higher education institutions and the schools also, general schools, teach the children that throughout all our history, it's really the education and the schools that help our nation to survive, help to keep Armenian language, our alphabet, and our identity, Armenian identity. And this is valued by the population overall, by the nation, and this is a message that is sent always to the students in all levels of education, including the higher education system.
Well, that's interesting because, in the United States, we have debates about identity because I dare say that the United States is probably a little more heterogeneous than Armenia is. And we have people from all over the world who live in the United States. And one of the things that our schools struggle with is how to incorporate people from all over the world with lots of different ideas. But what I'm hearing you saying is that you're really using the education system as a way of continuing and establishing identity.
Yes, also. It's very important for Armenian nation to keep Armenian culture, Armenian heritage, language, alphabet, because it's a unique alphabet and only Armenians use this alphabet. Maybe it's, and this language, maybe it's not so important for United States because the English language is widely used throughout the world. And there is no this concern about maintaining the English language and developing it, while it's a real concern and a value also for Armenians, our language, our culture, and the whole cultural heritage that we have generated through the centuries.
Sir, and you mentioned that you were working with somebody in Boston, Massachusetts, on exactly this issue. If I remember correctly, it's a woman who runs a school, and it's centered around this identity issue?
Absolutely, but before coming to your question, I just would like to follow the for you to understand how important the education for Armenians are, I would like to say, actually to emphasize the words that Father Messrob usually say. Armenians, they can save money, they can cut their food, but they will never save money for their kids' education. So, and coming back to your question, as Dasaran is one network which integrate all Armenian schools, actually 1,495 schools in one network, giving an opportunity for the schools in the capital and in the regions to be equally developed and to have one network which will connect all Armenians in it. We have actually spread our boundaries, let's say, and the idea is that, as we said, there is a big diaspora, Armenian diaspora in the world. So the big goal, the vision of Dasaran is to be able to connect diaspora schools to one platform, to have one bigger classroom. And actually we have already one piloted school from Boston, Massachusetts, which is St. Stephanus School, which is going to be very soon one of the first diaspora schools connected to Dasaran.
And the vision of that will be to teach language and cultural identity issues?
Not only. Actually, what we do in Dasaran, with the help of gamification of education, we are trying to teach kids to teach kids everything. You know, it could be like human rights, history, languages, math, about culture of their own country or United States or Europe, bullying, social inclusion, and everything, whatever is not even being taught in the schools. So we are trying to cover a lot of aspects. Meanwhile, we are trying to cut the boundaries between Yerevan and decrease the distance between Yerevan and capitals, making the education equally available to every school kid without matter where is their geographical location.
But is it so in Armenia that the people who live in the capital region tend to be more educated than the people who live in some of the more rural areas?
Unfortunately, it is like that, because in some of the regions we have a lack of qualified teachers. Probably Father Messrob will talk about it later on, because there is a big program right now initiated for coming future. But this platform is giving opportunity also to cover this gap about qualified teachers in the villages.
And Father Messrob, you're involved in an initiative to improve the quality of teaching in the areas outside of Yerevan?
In Armenia.
In Armenia, in general.
In general, in Armenia, and in diaspora too. This is a governmental and private initiative. Implementator is I-Foundation, but program is governmental program, and it's called National Program for Educational Excellence. 10 years program, which aims to give best educational opportunities to every Armenian kid. It is based on the achievements of IPE Educational Foundation and IPE High School. We developed a special educational program. 10 years we work in the field of education, and it is called Aratian Baccalaureate. It's demanding program, platform of excellence, already approved and accepted by Ministry of Science and Education, and now is in the process of international recognition. Curriculum is one aspect to give best, educational content to every Armenian kid. The second part is teacher preparation program. We are going to prepare during 10 years around 2,000 teachers with international qualification. And the third part are international exams. We're happy that this spring we will have here in Armenia internationally recognized exams in Armenian language in cooperation with Cambridge University. Teacher training program we are implementing in cooperation with UCL Institute of Education, former London Institute of Education, and to develop this special content, Aratian Baccalaureate curriculum, we worked with famous scientists from MIT, Harvard University, so to develop all this concept. We hope that Armenia will succeed in education and will be in the list of strongest, educational nations maybe in 10 years. This is a dream, but we work hardly to make it real.
Interesting. So it's essentially, from what I'm hearing you saying, that's almost like an Armenian version of the International Baccalaureate.
Yes, it's an Armenian version, but what is important for us, it's Armenian language program. It's not English language. Right. All these platforms of excellence, such as International Baccalaureate, A-levels, or APs, English language programs. We developed this special program which reflects the best achievements in education in the world, but also is based on our heritage, educational traditions, and, which is very important to me, values.
I understand. We have some family friends, some very good family friends who are Armenian Americans. So in the Armenian American community, would you envision the kids of friends of ours in the United States being part of this program?
I think that program is well known in diaspora. Moreover, I can say that many of them, if their kids are accepted to our school, they move from US, from Europe, from Russia to Armenia to give best educational opportunities to their kids. Teachers, we have teachers from US, from Europe, from practically of all corners of the world. I can just say you, the results of SAT scores of our school last year, the average of the school was 765 from 800, the average of the school. It's amazing result for the school. So we can give to every Armenian here in Armenia and in future in diaspora the best educational opportunities.
I understand. And Sir, so if I understood your platform correctly, you're also taking this same vision and trying to connect some students from the Armenian diaspora to what's going on here through the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Actually, if you know Armenians, it doesn't matter where they are geographically, they are definitely trying to be connected somehow to their motherland, especially for their kids to be connected to the culture, to the history of Armenia. So within the last 2 years, we had an opportunity with members of our team to travel to some diaspora schools. Always the question from the kids were, how big Armenia? We would like to be in Armenia. We would like to be connected to Armenian kids. So this platform will be a great opportunity for the kids to be connected to other school children living in Armenia, sharing with their experiences, sharing with the ideas, sharing with the knowledge of culture and history. So this will be a fantastic atmosphere for the Armenians to communicate.
Fair enough. And Karina, from a governmental perspective, how do you implement some of these goals that we're talking about?
I think you mean the goals of connecting Armenians outside with...
and the values.
And the values. We do have a very broad range of activities and programs which are directed to the Armenians living in diaspora. So we keep a constant ties with the schools all over the world which are teaching children Armenia. There are Armenian, specifically Armenian schools in many countries of the world. Annually, we are organizing a big conference for the educational institutions and schools from other countries in Armenia. We invite school principals or headmasters or the main educators to Armenia, and we discuss the problems that they face in other countries in terms of teaching language and Armenian language and history, in trying to keep the ties with Armenia. We also organize training for teachers who teach in the schools in other countries, starting from Russia to Australia and to United States. We invite them to Armenia and train them in Armenian, those teachers who teach their Armenian language or Armenian history and culture. So there are a number of other activities, and we always try to keep the connection and the ties and cooperation very strong between diaspora and here Armenia.
Fair enough. If I can ask you a question that I thought was kind of interesting, when I was coming to Armenia, I met somebody who is a school principal who told me that the schools were closed because of the flu epidemic. And if I understood this teacher correctly, he said that the ministry said that the schools had to close. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because if our Secretary of Education in Washington said we should close all the schools this week, I'm not sure that all the school districts in the United States would necessarily agree to do that. Do you have the power to do that, that perhaps other education ministries in other parts of the world don't?
The minister has a power, yes, and the obligation to establish the schooling year, the period when the children has to come to school independently, whether it's a private school or a public school or a state school. In connection with the flu, this was a suggestion made by the Ministry of Health to avoid spreading further and becoming a more epidemic between the children. So it was suggested by the Minister of Health, and jointly by our Minister and Minister of Health, it was made a decision to postpone for a week the lessons, not to cause new cases of children getting a flu.
Fair enough. We only have a few minutes left, believe it or not, because this has been a very interesting segment. Are there some things that anybody here would like to say to an American audience who, presumably there are a number of Armenian Americans who will be watching this, but there may be other Americans who are watching this who may not be that familiar with Armenian history or details about Armenia. Is there anything briefly you might like to share with an American audience?
Maybe to speak about higher education initiatives. I mean, what happened in Armenia during past 10 years, because we have in Armenia a lot of impressive, results. I can give examples. The undergraduate program of American University, French University, Slavonic University. A lot of things happened in the field of higher education. But there is a strong commitment and desire to establish here in Armenia a technological university in cooperation with best technological universities of the world, such as MIT. We are negotiating how to do that, about scopes and players here in Armenia. Maybe it will be a joint initiative of all major, higher educational institutions such as State University, American University, Polytechnical University, etc. All it will be a separate, campus and entity. So we're discussing how to do this. But I'm confident that this will happen, and this is a future for Armenia, because we connect the future of Armenia with strong education and with the development of high-tech segment of economic. Armenia has very impressive results in high tech. During last 8-7 years, this is the fastest growing segment of Armenian economy, from 25 to 30% per year. This is really a miracle. And we understand that during Soviet Union, Armenia was very strong in engineering, in robotics, etc. And we see that this is the way, the path of realization of Armenian talent. And so there are several interesting initiatives, and I think that eventually this will happen.
Fair enough. And speaking of interesting initiatives, we only have a few seconds left. Do either of you want to share something about interesting initiatives?
I would rather like to say also for American audience that Armenia is doing systematic reforms in all levels and spheres of education, starting from preschool, ending with a higher education and postgraduate education. Particularly, just continuing with what Father Mesrop said, we have now Armenia is a part of European higher education area and is implementing very important reforms also in higher education in the framework of Bologna process. And this helps our universities to be internationally recognized and to improve their quality constantly, passing international accreditation. Just recently, one of our universities, the University of Architecture and Construction, has got accreditation from French and Spanish agencies of quality assurance. We have other universities, as it was mentioned already, American University, the French University, Armenian, Russian University, that have been also accredited by respective countries that they represent and are now well recognized, and they ensure a quality education, higher education. So there are a lot of initiatives. Taking into account that time is very limited, it's very difficult to speak all of them.
Of course, thank you. Couple seconds, or you're happy with what you presented?
I'm happy. I just want to address my message to the audience, as you mentioned, to the American Armenians and to the Americans, that Armenia is a wonderful country. Whoever doesn't know about it, just Google it and find it. Visit to Armenia. You'll find a lot of interesting historical places to visit. So though it's a small country with small nation, but you definitely need to visit this country.
Thank you all. If you would like additional information about Karine Harությունyan, Father Mesrop Aramian, or Sուրեն Ալոյանը, please visit gov.am/en or armenianchurch.org or aybschool.am or dasaran.am, dasaran.am. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. Thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. Please join me again for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Sthíven Roy Gudmani, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.